Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sydney, and if you are new here, this is just a place where we can talk about true crime, spooky, scary stories, dark history, or whatever else I got going on in my brain. Today we're going to be deep diving into some dark history, which we haven't done for a while. So without any further ado, let's get right into today's video. We as a species have always had a thirst for knowledge, and throughout history we can clearly see this as we use our tools to help us understand the world around us. But this wasn't always a perfect, pretty picture. One of these long and very rocky roads has been the uncovering of our own human anatomy. Our earliest documentation of human anatomy was in ancient Egypt, when scrolls were uncovered that showed that we kind of understood the workings of human blood vessels and the heart. That being said, the ancient Egyptians did think that blood vessels actually carried mucus and air and fluids like urine and tears, and even the breath of life and the breath of death. But it did show that we had an understanding of what was going on inside of us. These scrolls were most likely made by embalmers that cared for and prepared bodies for the afterlife, as they saw a lot of death, and so they were probably able to look inside the body and gain some knowledge of the inner workings. Then if we fast forward to 5th century BCE, we can see the Greeks as they made leaps and bounds in understanding the human anatomy. Philosophers like Alcmaeon were some of the first that actually used dissected animals to understand the human body. And Alcmaeon was the first to be able to differentiate veins from arteries in the human body. But it was Herophilus in the 3rd century BCE that we think was the first person to perform a systematic human dissection. Herophilus was studying in the city of Alexandria, which was known for their very forward-thinking culture, art, literature, and science. In Alexandria, he had access to deceased criminals that he was able to dissect to gain more information about our human anatomy. He studied all the systems of the body, but he focused mainly on learning about the brain. Another man named Erasistratus was also learning about human anatomy through dissection, although he was studying more on learning about the heart. This research was so important for learning about the mechanisms of the body and disease, but unfortunately, since it was ancient Greece, this topic was very taboo. At this time, it was believed that the soul was trapped within the human body even after death, so it was extremely controversial to just be dissecting dead bodies. Learning and exploring the human anatomy stopped, though, after Herophilus and Erasistratus died. And not only that, but people just weren't interested in learning about the human body anymore. It didn't help either that skeptics began to write about these two men and how they were dissecting people as they were alive, and so it wasn't a very good look for the study of human dissection. Finally, in the 2nd century BCE, a doctor named Galen was able to start using animal dissection again to learn about the human body. He was able to debunk some of the older theories, as well as develop more detailed theories about what he was seeing and what he was learning about. But then, unfortunately, with the coming of the Middle Ages, religion kind of became the center of everything, and science was put onto the back burner. So it kind of looked like at this point, that was kind of the end of learning about human anatomy. I'd like to pause for a moment and thank our very first sponsor on this channel, AtlasVPN. Let me tell you, with AtlasVPN, you get access to over 1,000 different servers in 48 different countries, and this is all with data breaching monitoring. AtlasVPN keeps you safe by preventing your internet service provider from getting and selling your data. And on top of all of this, you can connect unlimited devices, and you get 24-hour customer service support. Show your loved ones you care this holiday season by grabbing them a subscription to AtlasVPN. If you click the link in the description, you can get a 2-year plan plus 6 months extra for about 86% off, which is $1.64 a month, which is an absolute steal. Again, either use the link in my description or go to getatlasvpn.com/Sydney Eliza, and thank you AtlasVPN for being the first sponsor of this channel. Thank you so much for watching the ad, and let's get back into the story. In 1231, Roman Emperor Frederick II actually passed a law that a human body should be dissected at least once every 5 years, and mandated that every student going into the medical field should see one of these dissections. That being said, it wasn't until 1315 that the next documented human dissection took place, and this was at the University of Bologna in Italy. Historians do believe that scientists and doctors were using autopsy and post-mortem investigations to learn about the human body, but it wasn't until this dissection that really changed the course of human anatomy for the better. So anyway, these dissections became a very normal part of learning and teaching about the body, and specifically a professor named Mondio de Lucci performed these dissections once or twice a year, and it usually was over the span of a few days. These dissections were very much standardized, and it included a person lecturing as well as a person to point at the part of the body that was being talked about, and then of course a surgeon completing this dissection as well. The bodies were actually given to the university by the city, and they were always executed criminals. And these dissections were not for learning more about the human body or gaining more intimate knowledge of the workings of the body, but they were purely for teaching students. That, however, changed in the 1400s because people actually began to uncover some of Galen's old work, and this kind of hungry spark reignited to learn about the human body and gain more knowledge about the human body. Most famously, Leonardo da Vinci around this time began to draw very intricate and very detailed workings of the inside of the human body. And it's noted that he probably dissected around 30 human bodies during his time. But it's kind of weird because none of his works really took off or became famous until the 1600s, but he was really doing this groundbreaking work. Then in 1594, the first ever Anatomical Theater opened up at the University of Padua, and this became a hub for students wanting to see dissections. Not only that, but theaters began popping up all over Europe, in the Netherlands, in Paris. This study was just becoming bigger and bigger, and this was amazing for both students and for science. But that being said, actually getting your hands on a human body, well, that was getting harder. And if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, how hard is it to get a human body, right? Like, people die all the time. What's the problem? But what I didn't think about and what I learned is that refrigeration wasn't really a thing yet, and especially not a refrigerator that could house multiple dead bodies that could just be saved for a dissection. At first, they tried to solve this deficit by suggesting a post-mortem examination after every person died, and this did fix the problem for a little while, but unfortunately the demand was just so much higher than the supply. It was estimated that thousands of bodies were stolen every year, but the only accurate number that I could really find came from 1826, where it was reported that about 592 bodies were stolen. And until the year 1832, taking a corpse from its grave and dissecting it wasn't actually a criminal offense, although it was very much religiously and morally looked down upon. At first, it didn't really make sense to me why doctors and students and scientists would be okay with digging up corpses and dissecting them without their loved ones' knowledge. But then I learned that these people thought it was okay because they were bettering the world around them. Although they were harming a few people, it was for the greater good that they were learning about anatomy and educating people. So at this point, a new job came onto the market, and this was called a resurrectionist. It was reported that in London around the 1820s, there were about 200 resurrectionists working. This job would start out by having the resurrectionists talk to their connections. This could be undertakers, local officials, church staff, and the resurrectionists would gain information about newly deceased bodies. These connections, or these spies, I guess you could call them, were then paid a cut of the money, and the resurrectionist would come back at night to do the dirty work. The resurrectionists usually chose newly deceased people because their graves were easier to dig up, the dirt was looser, things like that. They would usually come to the grave at night, dig a hole on one side of the coffin, and then pry open the lid, and then the pressure from the dirt that they didn't dig up on the other side would kind of break the coffin open, and they were able to hoist the corpse up and out of the grave pretty easily. The body was then usually placed into a sack and delivered straight to the person that needed to do the dissection. This whole process actually was pretty short. It only took about 30 minutes per body. That being said, resurrectionists actually preferred to use the mass graves of the poorer people that lived in London because bodies were just thrown into this large pit, and then after weeks they would be covered up. So this was very easy access for the resurrectionists to get their bodies that way. It's also reported that more sinister ways were used to acquire dead bodies. The resurrectionists would sometimes pay random women to pose as widows of the recently deceased men that were working, and then the women would go to the boss of the workplace and be like, hey, that's my husband, can I have his body? And they'd be like, yeah, of course, take your husband. And then the women would just give it over to the resurrectionists and they would then get a cut of the money. Not only that, but bodies would sometimes be taken from dead houses, which was sort of like, I guess, a modern day funeral home. And they would just take the bodies from there, and that was kind of an easy way to make money. But the worst of all is that sometimes these people would just barge right in to the recently deceased house while the loved ones were still grieving, take the body, and ransack the house. While the work was dangerous and sometimes criminal, the pay was incredible, and there was always a need for the resurrectionists because universities would always be in need of bodies and they would pay the most. Additionally, the type of body that the resurrectionist was able to acquire also changed the pay rate. For example, men, children, and freaks got paid the most amount of money because they were more of a rarity. And on top of all of this, the punishment for such crimes, if you were caught, was usually only a fine or a few days in prison. So this was a very, very good job to be in at the time. What I thought was really interesting is that there were actually resurrectionist gangs, and the most famous one that we'll talk about today was called the London Borough Gang, and they operated from 1802 to 1825. The gang consisted of about 6 people, and they provided most of the bodies to the universities in the area. But like with any business partner, there's always going to be some drama. There's always going to be some little tension going on, right? At one point, the gang insisted that they get a pay increase from one of the schools named St. Thomas Hospital School. And when the school denied this offer and just began to use freelance resurrectionists, the gang was not happy, to say the least. According to the records I could find, the resurrectionists burst into the building and began to assault the students and destroy and mangle all the bodies that were already in the school that had been gathered by these freelance resurrectionists. And basically what came from this is that the school was like, yeah, okay, we'll give you a pay increase. Yeah, and we'll only use you, nobody else, we promise. Resurrectionists and body snatching became such a normal thing that people began to watch over their loved ones' graves recently after they were buried just because they were scared that they were going to get stolen, which is crazy. Additionally, the way that people were buried was getting modified. For example, iron coffins, double coffins, grave alarms, and things like mort safes, which are basically like bars covering the top of the grave, began to be installed because this protected people's loved ones from getting stolen. Finally, something was done in 1832 when the Anatomy Act was passed in the UK. This made body snatching a criminal offense. That being said, it also gave doctors and students access to dead bodies if they weren't claimed 2 days after being deceased. This didn't fix the unethical practices that were going on, as most of the poorer people that worked in workhouses couldn't read or write, and so their final wishes, their burial wishes and things like that weren't being recorded, and usually management would take advantage of this. After the poor person was deceased, the boss could basically decide whatever they wanted to do with the person's dead body, especially if they didn't have family, and sometimes they would sell their employee's dead body to doctors, students, scientists, that kind of thing, for money. That being said, it seemed that the Anatomy Act did help, as from the records I could find, body snatching became more and more rare, dropping off very suddenly in the 1850s. So that was just a very short and dark history on human anatomy, body snatching, resurrectionists. I really like this topic. I kind of tried to make a through line through the history of anatomy. I hope it wasn't too confusing or boring. I tried my best to make this story interesting and fun for you guys. I'd like to once again thank the sponsor of today's video, AtlasVPN. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Make sure that you're drinking water. Make sure that you're enjoying the holiday season. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and keep being the bad bitches that you are.